Thank you everyone for coming to join the Shloshim for Bobby. Before I introduce Uncle Rachmil actually Shlomi first. Well, first before I introduce Shlomi to say a few words of the Messiah, I just wanted to speak about Bobby for a couple minutes. I was in Eretz Yisrael for Shiva, and I learned a lot about Bobby that I didn't know. I knew a lot about Bobby, of who she is and who she became and what she left behind. But I didn't really know about her in her younger years. And the Zayda story and how she met Zayda, it made a big Roshim on me. The Roshim was that in those days, back then, to have the musig of going out with a Ben Torah and wanting to marry a Ben Torah wasn't your common everyday occurrence. On top of it, Zayda literally came off the boat. There wasn't any resumes that we have today. There wasn't any phone calls that could have been made to do research about him. But Bobby decided she's going to marry Ben Torah. She's going to marry somebody who's going to become a gadol, someone who's going to become a rav and go into rabbanos. That in itself says a lot about Bobby. It also says a lot about where she came from. She came from a home where Zayda, we all know Elta Zayda, was a tzaddik nifla. But other than being a tzaddik, the midas and the way that he brought up his children was exactly that. And look at all his children, who they married, the problems that came up from them. I had the schus of going to Montreal many years, 5-6 years. Initial year was just to be there to be mechazik Zayda to daven. Landed up turning into davening instead of Zayda, set up. But it continued for 5-6 years after that. And probably one of the most pleasant experiences of my life was every Rosh Hashanah, every Yom Kippur being there, davening together Zayda. And the way it happened was that Bobby came over to me and she said to me, you know the niggun for Lakewood? I said, yeah. She says, no. So I did Lakewood. She says, okay, good. Went back into Shloshim. This was during Shachris. During the break between Shachris and Musaf, Zayda walked over to me and goes, do you know the niggun for Lakewood? I said, yeah. He goes, no. And he says, okay, you're davening Musaf. So that was as much preparation as with Musaf, about the same amount of preparation I had to speak, even though Tanshana did give me more time, but I didn't have the time to prepare. But the thing that stood out from the davening, I mean, watching Zayda daven was incredible. He still davened Ne'ilah every single year, Keiches on Keiches. Hearing him was beautiful, but watching him was incredible. But what stood out to me more than watching Zayda daven was watching Bobby watch Zayda daven. She'd sneak out from their Shloshim, she'd look out like a Kala who just got married, and she'd stand there and she'd watch Zayda daven in awe. I mean, she's been seeing this for 50 years, keep in mind. This wasn't he wasn't his first appearance that there was for davening for the Amid, and she stood there with this awe. And I think that the awe that she was looking at was not the way he davened, which was beautiful. But I think she was looking at Zayda, she wasn't looking at the davening. And if you want to talk about Bobby, you talk about an Eshes Chal. You talk about somebody who lived their life, mamish lamitoy, for their husband. Bobby wouldn't let Zayda walk around unless his jacket was perfect, unless Zayda looked Mekabadik. And again, it wasn't for her, it wasn't for Zayda, it was for Kavanah Torah. So if you start understanding what was going through Bobby's mind and her mindset, it was not only the people that you saw around her, but it was the Ikar Shadar, which was the Kavanah Torah. It's something that the last generation had, unfortunately, more than we have and more than we can appreciate, to see through everything for the Amitah. The Amitah was the Kavanah Torah. And that's what she saw, and that's why she helped Zayda, and she did everything to Zayda to become who he was. And she was taken Neza Kenegda. I mean, that's what Bobby was. Simchas Achayim, we know you stood around Zayda and everyone just smiled. We know about Bobby that she had a simchas achayim by looking at her mishpacha, by watching her kid, watching her eineklach, watching her eineklach. I know the cousins can remember that every time Bobby would come to South Africa, she'd come with a duffel bag. It would be quiet, everyone could literally hear the zipper open from that duffel bag. And out came these bags, shmatos or not, but Crazy Eddie came out, and each bag was designed for every grandkid. It wasn't stam, she made 40, 50, 60, whatever Canadian she had, but each package was designed for each child and thought out for each child, and she spent the entire year doing this. That she would come, and the kids would line up, and it was one of the most exciting things as little kids to get the whatever it was from Bobby. But it wasn't what it was the thought and it was the excitement that was created through what Bobby thought through an entire year. Unfortunately, the door has passed. There's very, very few people left from that door. And Baruch Hashem, we're the legacy that they leave behind. And Baruch Hashem, you can see the legacy they left behind. Just to end off very quickly, and I'm trying to set an example for everyone who follows me on the time limit of speaking. I think the best way to speak about Bobby is to let Zayda say it. If you look in Zayda's Hakdama, I actually look through all Svarim, it's kimat the same wording on every single Hakdama. Some he adds a little more, some he says a little less. But I thought this one is the one that brings to the point. We spoke about Bobby, about her Kovra Torah, understanding what it means Torah, understanding what it means to assist the husband, to be a true Eizer Kenegdei, to allow Zayda and allow someone to grow into a true Talmud Chacham, and being able to be Marbitz Torah, and where she stemmed from because of that is why she did this and why she made this all happen. I'm just going to read it instead of saying it and just be Messiah with that. Amru Chazal, Noshim b'mazachim. Chazal say that the woman, what is the schus that they have in this world? And the Gemara goes on to explain that the schus of their husbands going out to learn, the Torah that their husband learned, that's the schus that they have. Skip that part. It said, L'chein, hineni lavia b'zeh birchasi v'hakarasi l'rasi ezrasi ha'mahulala v'masacheles. With this, the Hainu, with Bobby allowing him and the schus that she should have from the Torah, from the Svarim that he's writing, to bring his bracha and his akara, he recognizes in akara satayv for the help and for the seichel. Bobby was a tremendous balasech. I mean, you'd sometimes call to ask Zayda Shine and she'd say, no, you ask me, I'll. And half the time you didn't get as pastor, and that was it, you got the answer from Bobby. So, as Zayda said, Bobby was very good at that, so it would work. Hamesefetz Boris Miriam Shetichya Bas Harav Hagoyin Rabbi Lazar Samson Shlita Shitali Shatir Chava Hadas the Manuchas HaNefesh Lamalbucha Lehisasek Baitzah Sifri L'Arayla. And I think that is Bobby. Zayda got it right once again. Bobby was somebody who was there as a friend, somebody there that was as a bar seichel, and somebody there that was help him to do what he needed to do b'menuchas hanefesh. Someone that came from the yichus of El Zayda, someone that understood what it means and what you're supposed to do to create another Zayda. And with that, he was able to be misasek by Tzai Sifri La'ilam, and that part of that he ends, Taka says in all his svarim, and he put this in every single sefer. It's the last thing he puts in before he puts in all these kids. And the interesting thing about Zayda's kids, which is talking about the nachas. You know, I was once by Zayda, I remember someone making a comment to the effect of, oh, it's such a wonderful nachas to see, you know, it's such a beautiful form of nachas to see Eina Klachta B'nai Torah. And Zayda said there's not a form of nachas B'nai Torah. The only nachas that's true nachas is to have bonim that are B'nai Torah. And that's what Zayda ends off with. He goes to the Takshim Mishpacha and the Rabbanos and the Ichas and everything, because that was the Ikka. That was the Ikka to Zayda, Mamela, that was the Ikka to Bobby. Bobby should be a schus for us. She should enable us all to continue in her path, in their paths. And with that, we call up Shlomi.
I'm going to go for Shlomi. And I was
no, he's going to speak first and then be Messiah.
Speak first.
I'm going to speak first and then be
Okay, fine. Yeah. Before, so I want to start, even though this is about Bobby, but I want to call Hananya to say a story that he said over at Shiva. I went to Flatbush, where Tante Shoshana was there, Esther, and Chana was sitting there. So we went, me and Plina, to Flatbush, and there's Hananya, who I found out later was actually camped out there for 7 days straight with his mother. Unbelievable. And he said over the story, I said, even though it's about Bobby, we got to hear the story. So Hananya, please come share the story. How about that? Yeah, come right here. This is like a, to me it's like a
say it from here if you want.
You say, no, say it from there, it's fine. Yeah. Come on,
I'll say it from here.
Say it from there, it's fine. Okay.
I don't want to take up the stage too much tonight, you know?
It's good.
It's, the story is, again, it's by request of Shloshim, obviously, that when I was in yeshiva there 11 years ago, and first just in general about Bubby, I just always feel like I was like just young enough where I didn't have all the years some of the older cousins had. Fully appreciate Bubby and Zeta, and I'm jealous of everybody who had more time than I did. But for that year, I actually stayed by Bubby and Zeta every couple of weeks, taking care of Zeta, bringing him to shul. And for me personally, it was huge. As far as the hashpah, as far as the experience, as far as picking everything up we're talking about tonight. But the story that Shloshim was referring to, it was one Friday where, I was a 20-year-old bocher, and some of my friends wanted to, and it wasn't, I'm not referring to you to name it, but they wanted to do something that might be questionable for a bocher to do. Let's keep it like that. And, get into a little trouble, whatever it is, this, that, and I was like thinking back and forth about, should I join? You know what, it sounds fun, why not? Don't live once, whatever it is.
Motzei Shabbos.
And Motzei Shabbos, exactly, and this was Friday. And I was thinking about this the whole Friday, 20-year-old self, and I went to Bubby Zeta for Shabbos, and Friday night, after the meal was over and everyone was sleeping, even Mark was disappeared, I don't know what happened, and Zeta, it was me and Zeta in the room, and I was thinking about what I was thinking about, and also Zeta walks over to me, and at the time Zeta was in and out at the time. He wasn't usually not zoned in on anything, but Zeta came over to me, and out of the blue, he looks me straight in the eyes, and he's like, "Don't do it. Don't do it." I'm not exaggerating. I'm like, "Zeta, what are you talking about? What are you talking about?" He's like, "Don't do it. It's not good. Don't do it." And true story. And I never felt so shaken in my life. I'm like, what just happened? And then Zeta just turns around. I'm like, "Zeta, what are you talking about? What are you talking about?" He went into his own world. So I've heard a lot of stories about Zeta over the years, but I actually experienced one myself. And I want to talk about Bubby also, but I'll wait till later to talk about Bubby more. But Shloshim wanted me to repeat that story.
So we know Zeta.
No exaggeration, everybody.
And I want to say another few stories about Zeta. And one day,
Did you do it or not? You didn't answer. Oh. Next week, a week later.
That's a real story. So, I didn't get the relationship. I was dating many Simchas Torahs, also Sukkahs, and I heard and saw a lot of things. And the relationship, it seemed, on the surface level, that they were kind of in a very good relationship. They were kind of on parallel tracks. His Bubby and his Zeta. And in a certain way, it's true because the European marriages were very much that way. They weren't so outwardly romantic. And it was a different concept of life and a different concept of expectations from self and from marriage. And but it would seem, because Zeta was very strong, that in a certain way maybe he didn't need Bobby so much. And this is the Nakuda I want to bring out. One Nakuda, how much he really did appreciate her. He would say lines like about Simchas Torah. Yaakov knows about the salami. Bobby would buy salami and she would cut these pieces into half and put them on a plate. And just about a kiddush by Simchas Torah. And they were all shul the minion, so it didn't last too long, the salami. And he would say, "Miriam, better the salami." And she would tell the salami came out. And Zeta would sometimes go, "50 kilo, I'm telling you, better the salami." And it seemed like he's really upset at her. And he would also say lines like, which none of us could get away with. If we'd say this to our wives, none of us would get away with it. He would say, like, to Pnina, Bobby's staying there, right, me, Bobby, and she says to Pnina, because he was by us in Lakewood, for Tzukis, and in Coventry Square came to us, and other places, in Lincoln Street. She says, "Pnina, where do you learn to cook like this? Not your mother, not your father." So Bobby's standing right there. Now it seems, it looks like but Bobby understood his sense of humor very well. And after, like the last years, you could see how much he adored her, how much he needed her. You could see how everything was really. But for someone who doesn't understand this kind of relationship and this kind of humor, you don't get it. You think, So that's really the point, is that really, like Ruben was saying, everything really that he had, he knew he got from her. And here's a Pelodic Zach we find. We know in the Midburg we had Mon, and we had Nana Kovid, and we had the Be'er. The Be'er was actually a rock. It wasn't a well, it was a rock that was misgalgal in more than 40 years. It was started off at the beginning of the 40 years, and then throughout the Midbar. And then when Miriam was nifter, so then the Be'er stopped. And then last week's Parsha, the Mei River, Moshe had to bring it back, came back with Moshe, but it wasn't a simple thing to bring it back. So, Appel de Gezach, why was Miriam Zeicha that the whole Klal Yisrael should have water to drink because of her? Because she waited by Moshe Rabbeinu by the water. So I mean, it's a Gavaldi Gezach, but still. So in this week's Parsha, we find that it says, Yuma Gever, Shesuma Oyin, Bilam says, V'yedeh das Elyon. Bilam was a Novi of great magnitude. He's Yedeh das Elyon. And the Gemara says, Hashem das Behem Tel Yoda. He couldn't respond to his behemoth, who told him off, and he was silent. He didn't have what to say to her. He knows Das Elyon. He knows the Baruch Shalom's Das. And the Gemara says his nevuah was like the nevuah of Moshe Rabbeinu to a certain extent. So the Gemara says he had one milo that Moshe Rabbeinu did not have. He knew how to be mechavan the shah. That there's 1 second, a split second, that the Baruch Shalom is zoyin b'chol yoyim. And Bilam knew how to be mechavan that second. And he could give a klala that it's early in the morning. The Gemara says a ma'isa, when sinning for what it is, you take a rooster and you look at the red flip on the rooster, you see when it turns to drop white, it's a split second in the morning. The Gemara has a mice with a mayor trying to do it, and he fell asleep, he said it's not to do it, it's not Hashem to do it. And he knew how to be mechaber that shah. The Torah says to Kasha, what can you say in such a split second? He says, you can say Kali, destroy them. So the question is, we can figure out more or less when the time is. The Gemara gives the Simonim with the rooster. Take 1,000 people. Put the rooster there. You know Be'erich what it is. Everyone just starts saying Colin. Somebody's going to hit that second. Think of Hitler. Think of Ahmadinejad. Think of anyone you want, right? And you'll hit that second, and you'll be Muhammad the Shah. Why not try it? Why anybody ever try that? The answer is it's not going to work. Because the Maisa has to do with the greatness of who you are. Bilam had a certain greatness to him. He was a Novi. And it only works if you hit it in the real way. If you by mistake landed it, it just doesn't work. The Maisa of what the Pu'ulis you do have to do with who you are. Waiting for Moshe Rabbeinu by the Nilus when you should put him in the is a Gavaldi Maisa Chesed. But because of Miriam, who she was, that Maisa was a most unbelievable Maisa. So because that greatness of the Maisa, that's why she was able to give mine to the Gans Klal Yisrael for 40 years. But this Miriam here, she gave life to her husband for I don't know how many years. How many years were they married? 60 years. But it was a great person. It wasn't a little. It didn't land by mistake. Everything she did was she had her father in her. She had her Zaydis and her mother. And I didn't know Zayda Samson, but I read things about him. And she had him in her, no question. I never saw her ever get angry. Did you ever see your mother get angry?
No.
No. Okay. I mean, I only saw her for the last, I don't know how many years, but you knew her for longer. Did you ever see your mother get angry? You remember ever? Huh? Not a star. Okay. So, who human being could say that never got angry?
Someone said today that in Israel the things the Shloshim. There's one time I remember we were very angry 21 years ago when they went on a tour to Auschwitz. I think it's one of the concentration camps, they were charging money to come in.
It's on the video.
But how can you charge money? So the video, someone said, how can you charge money for very and kill Jews?
Yeah. So a human being who doesn't get angry is not a regular human being. You have to understand what you're dealing with here. So therefore, everything she did was magnificent, and she gave that over to her husband. And he knew that. Your father knew who your mother was.
And she never complained.
So that's all I want to say.
We're not going
So you're not dealing with a regular, simple person here. And everything she did was magnified because of just like Miriam's Maisa, right? Who you are, what you do is magnified. And he knew that Zayda good and well. And he had his way of making his jokes, geschmack and everything. But the Maisa was like to be Einaklach, marry into the family. And we should all be Zeicha, just that a generation that comes out, is coming up now, should also go in Bobby's ways and Zayda's ways, and we should all be Zeicha to alle gute Sachen. I'd like to see him first. I'm just going to make a scene on Psochen. Go to the center.
for your birthday? Is this the birthday present? That's a real ribbon.
There is. Make a Neil Yosher for Miriam Mas Chaim Eliezer. See him on Sab. Simloi Iklo Pidyon Aben. Simloi, one of the Amoris went to Pidyon Aben. Boy Mene Pshita al Pidyon Pshita. He said, he asked a question. Pshita, it's obvious. Al Pidyon Aben. When you make the bracha Pidyon Aben, you make the bracha. I check the shalom the sois one al Pidyon Aben. So what do you? It's whatever. Kain made the bracha. If you made the Pidyon Aben, Avi Aben makes the bracha. Avi Aben Baruch, the father of the son, makes the bracha. What about Baruch Shechiyan of Yimon and the well, who makes that bracha on Shechiyan? Kain Baruch, Avi Aben Baruch. Is it the father or the Kain? Kain Baruch, the Mati Hamel Yodesh. The Mori, the Shloshim had a question. The Kain should make the bracha because he's getting the Hanoah, he's getting the money. Or Avi Aben Baruch, all the mitzvahs. He's doing the mitzvah of redeeming his son. Le'av Yodei. He didn't know the answer. Also, Shal Beit Midrash, he went to the Davin, to Beis Medrash. Amalei Avi Ben Baruch. The yeshiva told him, the father, the sons of Baruch Shneim, Lilchasa Avi Ben Baruch Shneim. He makes both brachas. He makes a bracha. He makes a bracha. Shach Yevik Yevik Yevik. Hajulach, Avi Psach V'Siglo V'Sech Psachim. Hajulach, Avi Psach V'Siglo V'Sech Psachim. Hajulach, Avi Psach V'Siglo V'Sech Psachim. Hajulach, V'Sech Psach Hajulach, Daiklo V'Sech Psach Daiklo. V'Sach Shalom V'Sech Psachim. V'Sach Shalom V'Sech Psachim. Hajulach V'Sech Psachim. Hajulach. Daiklo V'Sech Psachim. Daiklo V'Sech Psachim. V'Sach Shalom V'Sech Psachim. Hajulach Daiklo V'Sech Psachim. Daiklo Let's not shoot himself something, let's not shoot him. Like Baladim, like Awesome. Here it's in for now, the Nila Hinu, but they have a Sainu. Should take the Russell when I say, but when I say, say, Mother Lamball, Skanina Papa, Run Papa, not Papa. Ahoy by Papa, Abamoy by Papa, Raffin by Papa, Raffin by Papa, Aka by Papa, Ada by Papa, Dora by Papa. Harvard on Nila Hinu, it's his husband, Fina, Peace, Uncle Base, Over, Yana, would say, I'm going to so to base, one of you days, Beckle. Lame days, myself, the committee was settling the Yuli Samuel Gahaman Ebesh, Lesh Kuvelva, Frankie Sunny, Bakali, another Kim Gavel, or may not make itself bad. When I'm not law, I didn't handle the same shit, something of Kim, Dish, make the Dish, was help getting the Dish, Curtis. Shem Noshkim, Hamashkim, Hamashkim, the Third Hamashkim, the Ram Taylor. On a mail, on a mail, Kansla, in Kansla, on a Rotsam, Rotson, the Rotson of Bob, Rotson of Vashagas. Shemat, the Lim, to eat the shops, and she done Mirwell yesterday, and yet well. You're saying of another, the Noy, the high, Shem Shatan, the same stuff, so can't say any time, so Storm here, the Saibum, Wilboy, the Lami, which were last again to call the Summer of the Hour. So it's called the name of the worm, Tony, Chom Yamani, Zari, so Shomish, Atar P, Zari, Zari, Elam, Skambi, Salakha, Tampa, so Shop, and Lami, Sishma, he says, he sees Devil. We were on level, the Simple Shanshheim, Earth, Mila, Mike. Smile is coming and my eyes, and my team, my work, so much.
No, not yet. I'm see your Marcus. Marcus the Meister, Papa Yerushalayim. He's a fourth Tanoim. You have the leader of Lezer and Azari B'Shua, you have a Kiva. You go to Yerushalayim. When you get to Hatzayif and they tore the clothes, they saw Shua, actually even Kochi Kedoshim, they started crying. The key was Mitzachik. They said to him, why are you laughing? He said, why are you crying? He says, now facts are coming out. He said, that's why I'm laughing. Why? Because there's an Eidu, so Mishaya, in the morning, we are Kohen Chavis, Kiben Machayo, reminding Uri says Chayo. Uri will mean the Shrishim, Chaim the Shane. But the Gemara says, Dr. Elmai, the two Nevuos are told. Uriah said, Yerushalayim is going to be plowed. Zchariah says, Yeshus Kenos coming to Yerushalayim. Kenos is still going to sit in the streets of Yerushalayim. So I was afraid maybe the rules of Zchariah will not be fulfilled. Now that Yeshaya puts these two Eidim together, and I know that Uriah's Nevuah is Niskayim, so we moved up to Zchariah's Nevuah is also going to be Niskayim. So they said, Akiva Nechem Tonu, Hadr Lochem Sachs and Hadr Chalon. Daite Chalon Sachs Marcus and Chalon, they said Nashmi Noch, Sachs Marcus and Nashmi Non, Rabbi Amadel, Rabbi Amadel Ossi. Had nog Masechtas Makos had the Chalon. Daito Allah Masechtas Makos without the Chalon. But it's not Masechtas Makos in Sasha Non, about Madena, about Madosi. Had nog Masechtas Makos without the Chalon. How many times did I say it? 200. I can't even remember. How the Chalon? How the Masechtas Makos without the Chalon, it's Sasha Non, it's Sasha Non, about Madena, about Madosi. Niet van vandaag hebben we heel erg zin. Shit, we moeten zeggen, ik ben alleen maar pop. Niet bij papa, maar bij papa, nog bij papa, gooi bij papa. Abba mooi bij papa. Gaffer bij papa, waar kun je bij papa, moest terug bij papa, aan bij papa, door bij papa. Ach no, die nou hier natuurlijk gewoon met vier zo'n kabis terug. Je mag kunnen, dan gaan ze zitten, kabis ook kunnen die gaan moeten zeggen. We hebben het gemeen zeggen, hier wie zijn we voor kerk man, nee, voor je maar gaat doen, je gaat doen bedacht nog iets. Oh, die wil gedaan, die kerk van mijn benen. Zello, ik moet nog nog die helemaal veel straks geen meer besmet. Belooi me juist weer kroon, ik zeg misschien die moet zijn misschien moet lopen heel. Oh, dan met een kant met mijn kamerschaar. Oh, dan wat weer wat zie, men was geen maar je moet weer schach, als je wat wil, in de schach dat je nu maar nog steeds niet mee neemt. Dat is weer dag boog. Iets van de houden, hij heeft sections staan, zijn zeg maar, kunnen zijn geen seks zo maar heel. We zijn maar niet mooi, laat me maar eens kijken wat koud is om te zeggen, zelf daar wel. Zo stel het dan met de gewoon helemaal niet zo. Zit er misschien wel niet veel wie zou, we zeggen nou heel. Kijk, we staan dan mooi schop schap wat is maar weg, test het schrijven. Gib ihm mir was noch nicht rein. Oh, ich bin mir minus mal schreiben, ja, wir sind mit dem da noch so was schon daheim. So. Kaderis Kadesh Mirabo. Und was sieht es gerade toll, ach wir müssen sein, ach doch kein Raum und den Karte die uns schleich. Schau mal, komm mal egal, wir werden kommen noch. Aber das soll doch kommen, ich meine das. Wir haben noch gut überlegt, mal Hussein Korei. Ich rein, wir mir rein, ich bin Israel. Aber wo ist mein König wo? Amen. Ich kann doch mal. Voorkomen kunnen we niet smaken, maar we gaan mee. Ik zal maar smaken, kan je alleen welke Israël in Boa mee. Ik zal maar mooi als Israël alleen welke Israël in Boa mee.
The phone's ringing off the hook.
So Avram surprised us with the siyum. I didn't know about it, so everybody should know. I didn't call actually WhatsApp Shlevi 2 nights ago, and I was like, I need to have a siyum. I'm learning the Gil with my son. I have 7 blood left. It's going to be rough the next 2 days, but if I'll have to do it, Shlevi's like, let you know in the morning. I'm always like, yes, I have a feeling it'll muck us through the night. So, I think just to add to what Shlomi was saying, the phenomenal bond between Bobby and Zayda, and people knowing and being able to say things we couldn't say, I think it worked in both directions. Zayda did it, but Bobby also did it. In Bobby's kitchen, I don't know if anyone remembers, but it said, my husband is the boss, but I'm the bala boss. So I think this conversations worked in both directions. Next, we have the comment of having a kurach meal.
Shlomi, where did Shlomi go? Shlomi, I was hearing what you said before about Bubby never complained, she never, she really spoke about herself. If you go even further with it, it reminded me a story that happened with me with my Shiva, Shmuel Birnbaum Zatzal, Zechatzak Levracha. There was somebody, had a chavrusa near Yeshiva, and we came to, Chavrusa got engaged. So everybody came to the Vart. Everybody came to the Vart. come to the Vard, Shmuel sits down there, and then it came time for Shmuel to speak. Shmuel gets up and says, Rabbi, I have to tell you something. This chassan is nicht kein Mensch. It's not a mensch. It's just kein Mensch, Shmuel says. In front of the future father-in-law, the future, this kein Mensch. So everybody's mumbling, how can he get up and say that this person's not a mensch at his verb? So let me explain to you why. He says, I know this bacher for 25 years in my yeshiva. I never saw him once not get angry. How could somebody not get angry, not get ever upset one time? He says, in 25 years, he's a rai, he's nicht kein Mensch, he's a malach. This is what he said. Bobby, we know, again, I wasn't planning on speaking about this because, but you mentioned that story, that machshava, Shlomi, about, it was more than the fact that she never complained. I don't remember ever talking about herself once. Yet she's a person that was able to mavatal herself to her husband, even though she had so much about herself. She was so unbelievable, so smart, her opinionated and everything, but still be able to mavatal. That's really the key trick. Really the key trick is to be able to do that. So I never heard her get angry. We had many Pesach Sidorim that used to come to us for Pesach. She had what to say on the Seder, but still was able to mavatal herself to Zeder. Never heard her get upset once, and if somebody else got upset, she had this just way of, never getting into the fight, never getting involved. So, like nicht kein Mensch, like the Shmuel said, it's not normal. So, I want to second that machshava that you said. I think it's a very important akuda. In all the years that I know, I haven't seen Bobby for so many years because I was in America, Eretz Yisrael. But that's my original machshava was that point. I wanted to say, I was thinking a little bit about the Shloshim, this 30 days. Why 30 days? Why not 25? Why not 35? What's the magic of 30 days? I saw one Mefarish brings down 30 days is like the cycle of the moon. I didn't totally understand what he was trying to say. Like it's also a cycle. I didn't understand really what the Mefarish wanted to say. But I was thinking maybe it has something to do with the fact that 30 days is considered keva. It's considered fixed. We know that by mezuzah on a house, if you rent a house for 30 days, you don't have to put a mezuzah up until you're there. After 30 days, you're not considered aroy, you're not considered temporary anymore. You're considered, it's fixed. It's permanent. Then you get the 30 days. A talis, a bar, a talis, 30 days. And even by the Akamas Mishkan, they put the Mishkan up. They didn't count Klal Yisrael because the Shekhinah needed to be for 30 days. They didn't count the Mishkan. They didn't count the people in the beginning of Nisan. They count the beginning of Iyar. This same idea. I was thinking that if you speak about a basis, you have a hesped right away. You have the initial feelings that you have, but after 30 days, there's certain fixed permanence that you start to feel. You have time to think about the value of the person on a different level, and that's the value of the Shloshim. After 30 days, you have a little bit of time, and you think about it, and now you have a different cook, a different feel a little bit. So, coming from that side, I wanted to say some thoughts a little bit about what I call the shviger, you call the bubby. This week's parasha, we're talking about Miriam, how appropriate it is that it came out this way. It's a very, very, very hard thing to understand. It says that they didn't have the water for the Eidah, and it says that she died there, Batikaver Sham, she got Tamar Sham Batikaver Sham, she was buried there. The Klei Yakar and the Alshach both say a similar idea. It's really very hard to understand. They said that Klal Yisrael didn't appreciate Miriam. Alshach says, and the proof is because there was no hesped. There was no hesped. By Aaron, there was a hesped of 30. There was 30 days of bechiyah, of crime. Moshe been through 30 days of crime, but there's no hesped. He's died from the Lashon Sham. He died there and he buried there, and that was it. There's no hesped. How's that possible? And therefore he says that's why the pasuk says there was no water. To tell you that they didn't appreciate. In other words, it's different by Aaron. Aaron also, when he was nifter, they lost the anonim, they lost the clouds, the Gemara says, but the pasuk doesn't say it directly out. But here that's why it says it directly out. They didn't appreciate Miriam. They didn't appreciate it. Now the question is, how is that even possible? How is that even possible? The Gemara says in Tainus, Shlosha parnasim tovim amdu Yisrael. There were 3 parnasim, 3 leaders, 3 manhigim that Klal Yisrael had. Who were the 3 that Hashem gave? Moshe, Aaron, and Miriam. The Targum Yonason says on a pasuk in Micha, it's a pasuk in Micha that says, Lashon the pasuk is, I took you out of Mitzrayim, and I sent you Moshe, Aaron, and Miriam. That's what the pasuk says in Micha, Perek Vav, Perek Zayin. The Targum Yonason says, I sent you these leaders. Targum Yonason says, what did they do? What did each one of these leaders do? So Targum Yonason says the following. He says, Moshe taught the Torah. Aaron was the Mechaper on Klal Yisrael because of the Kohen Gadol. And Miriam was the Eruei L'Neshaya, to teach the ladies. To teach the ladies. And the Shloshim say, it means to teach them how to live, how to deal with life, how to stand up against these sermons, against problems. This is all the Eruei L'Neshaya, to teach them how to live and how to handle and how to be and how. So Miriam's job was not just, the Miriam that we think that Miriam's just one story in the Torah that Miriam, put the Moshe Rabbeinu into the basket, or Miriam sang songs, Az Yashem Moshe, Az Yashem Miriam. Miriam had a full-time job. Shloshim parnasim, Tovim amdu Yisrael, Moshe, Aaron, and Miriam. There was a full-time job, according to the Talmud. That's shot in the pasuk. How could that be? How could they not appreciate Miriam? It's almost impossible to understand. If it was true that she was the leader, and she's a parnasim. And by the way, the lashon parnasim, parnas is a leader, comes from the same lashon of parnasa, which is to feed, to be able to have a parnasa. The be'er and the mayim and the anam was all to protect and to mefarnes Klal Yisrael. So a leader has to have that ability, which is a sense of giving. That's the whole idea of a leader. You have to have other people on your mind. So how could this be? I tell you, I looked around the Mefarshim. I didn't see anything on it. I found it very, very schwer, very difficult. I was thinking about Shava, but I don't have it really worked out. I was thinking that maybe, perhaps, Miriam died, and Rashi tells us this was a new generation, totally new generation. These are all the people that, for the first, had died in Yom Lashana by the Aver of the Meraglim, and these were a new generation that was going to go into Eretz Yisrael. That's what Rashi says, the Eid Shlema. I was thinking that in some way the new generation didn't appreciate, like the older generation had appreciated. And that was the reason why there was a lack of appreciation at that point, because this was the point where they didn't grow up with Miriam dealing with them on a day-to-day basis. And there's a new generation out with the old and with the new. And I was thinking that Ulai, perhaps that's hinted over here, that this was the time, according to the Alshach, according to Play Yoker, and I think that that's our responsibility now. We think about Bubby. What do we think? We think about, okay, what did Bubby mean to me? But if we look at ourselves as generations, we look at ourselves as diverse, then I represent thousands of people in the system that come out of me. And we think about what lesson are we transmitting into diverse, not only to us, that we learn, I was looking at some of the things my daughter put together, this unbelievable booklet, and the things that people said about Bubby, and it's unbelievable. So how do we, this sense of permanence, this shloshim, this sense of kavua, that we think about permanent, that we can take this machshav and move on with. That's, I think, even though we're the next generation, sort of to say, What lessons could we take from that? What could we, what do we take from that as we move forward? So I was thinking, what was the specialness? I mean, you talk about Bubby, but you talk Bubby and Zayda together. They were a unit, right? So I mean, what was special? What was there were a lot of beautiful things about them, but I would say that, and this is something I think everybody in this room identifies with. Zayda used to have a line. His line was, "I like nice people." That was his line. I like nice. What did he mean by like nice people? I'll tell you what he meant. He liked normal people. That's what he meant. He used the word nice, but he meant normal. I can't begin to tell you how many times I would go with him to his chair, or so I heard some cheer from somebody, and he'd come back and he'd say, "Ich weiß nicht, was redt." And then, Shloshim, because he held it was krum. If a person said something that was not nice or not normal, it really bugged Zayda a lot. And I think it bugged also Bubby. They were Torah in derech eretz. They were Torah and normal. Torah and derech eretz. That was the combination. You look at these pictures, you look at she was on the swing and she went to the shiur and she did this. But normal, but yet Molei Torah. That combination is what I think is what this family is really all about, is what we're trying to make that combination. It's a person could be unbelievable into Torah learning, but doesn't have the other side. Doesn't have the ability to relate to people. They able to relate to anybody. So that combination of Torah and derech eretz, normal, nice, this is what they were. But they were mevatel themselves to others. Mevatel themselves to others. That was the leadership part. When Zayda got sick, I don't know how many of you came to Montreal, and when everybody flew to Montreal because it was his last time in the shul. There's anybody, and we came there and there was a meeting over there for Zayda.
Yes, I was there.
You were there? And so Zayda he had gotten sick and he was going to go to Eretz Yisrael. I went into the room to speak to him. He says, "Rachmiel, let me tell you something. Till now, my job was to serve the klal. Now my job is to be Evet Hashem." That's what he said to me. Meaning, this is what I was doing till now, but that's over now, because I can't do it anymore. And that's an unbelievable statement, which means till now I was mevatel myself to the Am. Now I'm mevatel myself to this. Both about myself to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. This is what they were. That's why Bubby never said a word about herself. These people were not in the business of themselves. I mean, Zayda was very proud of his Svarim, and that I think he had the right to be proud of them, and he was proud of what he had accomplished. That's nothing to do with that, but that was his tachlis. That's what their tachlis was. So I think the more people have within themselves, it's harder for them to be mevatel. And I think that was a big point. The last machshava I like to say is like this. It says that when Miriam was nifter, the water disappeared. Moshe Rabbeinu came to the rock, couldn't find the rock. Pasha couldn't find the rock, couldn't find the same rock. And then eventually he hit the rock, so speaking to the rock, okay. The Gemara says, like Shlomi said, that it came back in the schus of Aaron and Moshe. Came back in the schus of Aaron and Moshe, the water. Now the question is, if it came back in the schus of Aaron and Moshe, so what do you need the same rock? If the rock is the schus of Miriam, so then you need to come back, you need the same rock. But if it's Aaron and Moshe, it's a new game. It could be any rock, what do you need the same rock? Also difficult question. If Miriam was the schus the rock, and it came back for Aaron and Moshe, so who needed Miriam? If you have Aaron and Moshe, so what do you need the original Miriam schus for? You have Aaron and Moshe. Shlomo Kluger says the following unbelievable part. He says that when it came back, it didn't come back in the schus of Aaron and Moshe. it came back in the schus of Miriam. Just that he says that since, this is an unbelievable word, Rabbi say, that the koyach of Miriam's neshama was able to mishtatev back since Moshe and Aaron were in the world. So Moshe and Aaron's, the fact that they were living and they were Torah-tic people, unbelievable people, so they were able to mamshich back the schus of Miriam. Their koyach was to be mamshich back the schus. Unbelievable. In other words, that answers the question why had to be the same rock. And that answers the question why it wasn't Aaron and Moshe. It was Miriam still Miriam's schus. And that's why the Targum Yonasan says later on, by the way, in the Be'er, it says by the Shira, it says it was still the Be'er of Miriam. He said the Be'er of Miriam, when Be'er of Miriam, it's already finished. So, right, so of course, 100%. So, what we see from here is like this. Whatever we do here in this world, if we're doing what we're supposed to be doing, and we have a double value. Number one, whatever we do, our mitzvahs and our Torah and our chesed and just being good people is a schus for the mace. Right? It's a schus for her. But it's the opposite also. Because we can be mamshech, her schus into us if we're in the game, if we're doing properly. And we can be mamshech that schus, and that can be pshat and schus avos. I never understood the idea of schus avos till I read the Shloshim. What does schus avos mean? He has schus avos, so the answer is that you can still be mamshech that schus if you're still in the game. Who says you get schus avos if you're not doing what's proper? But if you're doing what's proper and you're in the kedusha belt, you're doing what's proper and handling yourself in business properly, I think it's to do so you have that schus to connect in, like Shlomo Kluger says. So in Mela, I just want to say that in the schus of the idea of Shloshim being a fixed time, a permanence for the future, that what we do should be a schus for Bubby, and she should be Zaka for us.
2 points to feed off the last husband. Growing up, we used to talk about Altazega, and he never spoke a word of Lashon Hara. Never. He sat at a chasna, he sat at a simcha, he sat there quiet by himself, he never spoke. That's what we spoke about Altazega, but you know, as a memory, I don't think anyone in this room can say they ever heard Bobby say a word of Lashon Hara. Ever. Never. I've never heard Bobby say a bad word about anyone, but Lashon Hara is something I can I've never heard a word of Lashon Hara come out of a mouth. I don't know how many of us can say that. I don't know how many of us can say that. One other point I remember Zayd is one of his most favorite lines about today's generation is how like people today would stop keeping the chumras and start keeping the halachas. That was the normal. That was being a normal. Keep the yesodis, keep the basics. The chumras, you worry about it. Keep the basics. Yep. Millions. Next, with the covenant of having a Yitzchak. So, what happened?
I've been wrestling with this is the Kiddush from today, and the Val says that if it's fresh, it doesn't matter if it's not so good, but I think it's very good. I've been wrestling with this medrash for a while. The medrash said to the medrash at the end of Kahalas, and medrash is not something to be laughed away because it takes a brings medrash. The medrash is like this: the Shosh Adam lift him in the because the Baruch Hu Eimer, the Malachi Hasharis, Re'u, Ma'avriyas Eimer Salaf. What do people say about this person? Kasher Haya? Yerushalayim Haya? Was he a kosher person? Did he keep halachas? Was he Yerushalayim? explain this? Well, this person, what was he? Rabbi Yochanan mentioned asking the Malachim. Miyad, if they answer affirmatively, because of Perechas Ba'avir, the Parsha explained that the Mitzvah can't go straight to Gan Eden. Everybody who quotes this Medrash, they're like, what does it mean? The Rebbe doesn't know what's going on. The Rebbe has to ask the people, what do people have to do? And I was looking to see a pshat, but today I saw a Meshech Chochmah. Maybe it's an opening. Meshech Chochmah says, Parshas Misas Bnei Aaron. It says, Misas Tzadikim, I'm reading a little bit. Misas Tzadikim, just like Yom Kippurim is Mechaper, it's a Gzeres HaKosov that Misas Tzadikim is also Mechaper. It's just, that's how it is. But, look at Meshech Chochmah. Davke Kasher Kereu Mikra Kodesh. Yom Kippurim is Mechaper if you recognize it for what it is and you respect it. Somebody who kicks it, you says, he laughs it off, it's nothing. And he doesn't think it's worth anything. Is like just any other day. Yom Kippur is not mechaper if you don't respect it. Cain, he says, b'tzadikim, b'tzadik im machshivai, u'meroimimai, oz misosei mechaperes. If he is respected, then it's mechaper. But if he makes the tzaddik away, it's not mechaper. And I thought maybe this is pshat in this medrash, because if somebody, and that's the purpose of a hesped, because if a person talks about somebody who's nifter, and he respects him and says good things, it means that he's able to be miskaper from this misa, and the misa is not for nothing. Because if people would not be respecting him and anything, so the misa is forgarnished. So it's the gresta ta'olis for the nifter that the misa should be, his misa should be mechaper and it should reach what it's supposed to accomplish. And that only happens if people recognize what this person was and that they can learn something from it. So Chatzkel writes in a letter, I think that could be a pshat in the Medrash. That is why it says there that miyad mutosef berachas ba'avir, because if people say the right things, it means they mekabel that person and they recognize him for what he is, and then his misa can be mechaber and it's for something, not for nothing. Chatzkel writes in a letter that there's a single theme that encompasses all the hagim and dinim of Avelis, and that is the concept of Noisev Oilum Chaveli. A person passes away from the world, and it's a difficult time. And the Nicham Avelim, which is Milas Chesed, the Rambam calls Ima Chaim, Ima Mesim. It's both, and it's a hard Rambam to understand. But that's the pshat, because all the things that are done are benefits for the nifter. And the hesped is part of that, like we just mentioned, and we'll see further. I also, by the way, wanted to thank the Balach Sandi that made this whole venue possible, and all the Restatfin, so that there should be a bracha covered for Reykjavik. Now, the Shulchan Aruch in Siman Shin Dalet Mem is very clear about the very stringent requirements of a hesped. You have to be properly masked with the nifter. It says there that one may slightly overstate the qualities of the nifter, but the only reason that you're allowed to say more, and slightly more only, is because the Bach explains understating the nifter's milas would be chaz v'sholem, be a terrible thing. The Bach puts it, the version of the Bach is Shem chaz v'sholem yekatzer. Chaz v'sholem, you should say something less than what the nifter really deserves. And therefore you're allowed to say a little bit extra, just to make sure that you don't inadvertently cut something out. So it's a very narrow path that the Shulchan Aruch leaves open. Gemara Nivamis discusses the famine which happened during the reign of David HaMelech. It was about 30 years after David HaMelech became king. And it says there, it's a Psukim in Shmuel Aleph and Beis, there was a famine for 3 consecutive years. And it was understood that there must be a good reason for it, no rains all of a sudden. So they started checking around, they figured it must be an Aveira of some kind. They looked for Avodah Zarah. Checked over in all Eretz Yisrael, nobody saw Avodah Zarah. The second year, the famine is still continuing. They checked for improper things, nothing. The third year, they checked for people who promised tzedakah and don't give it. For something, the Gemara Rayas why each one of those items could bring Atziras Geshama. But they didn't find out either. But let's grade it, they have no more choice. They had to ask Urim B'Tumim. Urim B'Tumim, apparently, you could only ask if you had no other alternative. Otherwise, you couldn't get an answer. And the response was, Vayomer Hashem, it says in the Pasuk, El Shol Be'el Beis Hadam. It's about Shol and the Beis Hadam. What does that mean? The Beis Hadam is the story with the Gevonim, that Shol killed the Gevonim, whatever, that's another part. But what's the part about Shol? So the Gemara says, Sholei Nishpat Ka'alacha. Shol was not properly eulogized. It's Pilaplum. If you look in the Psukim, there's 12 whole Psukim. There's a hesped that David HaMelech made on Shol and Yonis. 12 Psukim. And the Gemara is saying it wasn't enough. You missed something. How could it be? How did this happen? So it occurs to me that possibly Shol HaMelech became Melech because he was a very, very great Tzanuah. The Gemara says a story that Shmuel already had anointed Shol to be a Melech, and he had opportunity to say, and he said nothing to no one. He kept it to himself. He's the first Melech Yisrael, and he doesn't say anything. And then Ashar puts it very succinctly. Mechlal Tznius says, like Tznius, how's this with Tznius? Because the Gemara calls him a Tznuah, because the Gemara says that Mechlal Metoich Tznius Shai Barachel came out Shol, Metoich Tznius Shai B'Shol came out Esther. What's the Tznius? What does it have to do with Tznius? Zog the Ashar, Mechlal Tznius hu Shelo Yediya Odom Malosei. Part of Tznius is you keep things private. You don't tell people about what you are. You don't say anything about it. The Shviga Zechariah Bracha not only tried, but she was very successful at hiding her greatness. She would never say, I accomplished this, I did that. You could find out only if you found out from somewhere else. Like somebody told you a story, you saw this, you saw it. But she wouldn't tell you anything ever. And she masqueraded very well as a simple person. And because of that, it makes it very difficult to say a husband. You don't really know what was really going on. Like what happened in the Shol. And by Avram also it says, Vayover Avram, this by the Sarah of Kaiso. And there's two questions. First of all, the order is apparently a little bit backwards, because the normal thing is first there's crying right away, and then you get around to making a husband. The Shver discusses this in the Akdama from the Netzach Yaakov. He has a whole clarity. That's one question. Another question that I saw, somebody wrote down and said, how come Yitzchak Avinu is not in the picture? Yitzchak was 37 years old when Sarah passed away. He's not a baby. Avram comes to make a husband, and Yitzchak is not around. So that's teretz. But I saw a beautiful teretz. He says, the mile of Sarah was that she was bas kuf kebas chof, bas chof kebas zay, that her whole life was the same. She didn't in any way regress or alternate. What she was, and she did all those things from the time she was very small. When Yitzchak was born, when Sarah was 90. He didn't know anything of that. And he couldn't talk about it firsthand. He had a hearsay, but he couldn't say because he wasn't born. So it would have been Geray, and he would have to have left something out. So only Avram, who knew Sarah from way back, he was able to make a proper husband. And not only that, the reason that the husband had to come, the Lakewood, the Shira talks about that. He was boiched before in Shloshim, and then he came to Hebron, because when you're dealing with a person, Sarah was also aggressive to know, we know that. Pasuk says, Hine no yadati, Kishu Basmarayat, everyone didn't know what she looks like. And the person that hides themselves, hides everything. So Sarah was also a big tzulah, and we can assume that everything that she did, all the mices would think, Geirim and this and that, and Geirim was a full-time thing, but she did it by herself and didn't tell everyone, mix everyone in. So he didn't know all that much until he was waiting, he had to sit down and think and figure out exactly what she was about, because he didn't even know. And that's why Kaiden was Lefkais, he had before. But in order he had to think about it to make a hesped, and only after he made the hesped do you actually realize what your loss was. Because when you make an accounting, somebody knows he had a fire, something burned up in the corner. But then you start looking and you start checking carefully and you realize, oh, what you lost. When you realize the whole picture is when the Bechia comes out, and that's when you realize what really was going on. The Thesis brings down well-known Medvish, Roshainin Kemalachim, Anu Kebedei Adam, and Roshainin Kebedei Adam, Anu Kechamayrim. What does this mean? If the early generations were like people that were Malachim, then we're people. And if the early generations were people, then we're Chamayrim. We're asking a question. What are Chazal saying here? Tell us, is it this or is it that? Which one is it? The Pshat is different. The Medrash is not asking anything. It's making a statement. It depends how we view previous generations. If we view previous generations as Malachim, that they actually were, then we have a right to call ourselves people, because we can think and we can look at the picture and understand what is. If we think that the previous generations were just regular people, like we see and we are today, then you're missing the whole thing, and you're just like a chamayr. The farmer takes his two chamayrim out with the wagon or with his plow, takes it into the field. So the farmer sees two chamayrim in himself. What does the chamayr see? The chamayr sees another chamayr, a third chamayr that has 2 feet instead of 4. But he sees chamayrim. He doesn't understand. He doesn't know what a person is. So if we view previous generations as being plain old people, we are not better than chamayrim because we see nothing. The Shvika Zechariah Levracha grew up almost a century ago. It was a very different world than what we know today. It was mentioned already. Baltimore had many Jews, and there were shuls, and kosher butchers, and so forth. But there was very little in the way of Yiddish and Jewish Hebrew education. Everyone went to Goyish public schools. There were some few that had after school, they had Hebrew classes, and the Shvika went to Rav Schwab Shurim, and as a child, since she grew up in the house of Adam Gadol, and let me just tell you about Adam Gadol, in the Hagdamah of a certain Sefer, who was a Rav in Baltimore, he writes about Rav Samson, Harav Hagoyin HaMafusim. He wasn't a small fish, and people realized that. So she knew when she comes home from public school and the teacher said all kinds of weird things, she would check everything with her father to see, to vet it. Is this right? Is it wrong? How to say it and how to deal with it. And somehow the whole environment that she grew up in didn't influence her hashkafas. In her sister's book about Rabbi Goyen and Rabbi Chaim Samson, it says that she asked her father once, where is she going to find a proper chassan? She asked him. And she says, she asked him more than once. And you know the answer? You promised to take her to the Mir. To the Mir Yeshiva, and he'll find somebody from the Mir Yeshiva. And she would insist, oh, but ich will always bleiben. She says, I want to live at Julie. She wasn't leaving it to him. I figured out this could have only been not later than 1938, because after 1938, Rav Samson would have said that he was taking her to the Mir, because there was no going to Europe after 1938 approximately. So at 1938, she could have been maybe a little bit after Bas Mitzvah, 13 years old. And she understands that it's not possible to find in Baltimore somebody for her. And when I read this story, I was reminded of Rivka Menu. He says, what happened? She went down to the water, and as it sees, the water comes up to meet her. Instead of her going to the Mir, the whole Mir Yeshiva came here. And she had to do a choosing over here. She was able to choose. And did she choose? She was not lacking for choices. She did not have to pick up a yeshiva. I happened to be, at the time, people looked very scant and very down on Bnei Torah. It was not very popular, to put it very mildly. She could have chosen a rich fellow, somebody with a higher education. But she had those strong hashkafas to guide her to marry somebody who was a great Talmud Chacham. We all know the member of Eshes Chaver Kechaver. Wife of a Chaver is a Chaver, actually it's a Mishnah in talking about Maisris. It has nothing to do directly with the Talmud Chacham. It's a very strange Gemara that makes that parallel between Eshes Chaver, but that's another whole story. But it's a mistake to think that the wife of any Talmud Chacham is equal to the wife of another Talmud Chacham. You know, the wife of Talmud Chacham is like a Talmud Chacham. There was a story that I heard when the Rogatchover Goyen was nifter, and this city understood that there was the standard procedure that the Almana would get a pension from the city, that the Rav was the Rav. That was included in your normal contract. And they wanted to pay her as the normal pension that was accepted in those days for a normal Rav. And she claimed, she says, the Rogatchover himself got a much higher salary because he was a Rabban Shel Kol Yisrael. Everybody knew it. So they had to pay him more to get him as a Rav. And she claimed that her pension should also be higher. And the Shaila went to Reb Chaim Moiser. God Lador had to pass on the Shaila. And Reb Chaim Moiser ruled in her favor. Because the wife of a real Kohen Gadol is much more than just any Rav or anything else. The Mir Mashgiach of Chatzkel wrote very few letters of Haskama for people. He wrote a few, but very few. And he wrote on the Shver, he writes, Alayhu Migdayle Yeshiva Seinu. He's from the great ones in our yeshiva. The Mir Yeshiva was known as the elite of all the yeshivas. And the Chatzkel describes the Shver as one of the elite in that yeshiva. So she knew what she was choosing when she did the choosing. She could see somehow that the Shver was Mura Me'am. He was much more than all of them, and she had her choices. I know that for a fact, because the Shver himself told me once, I don't know if I should say it. He told me when they read him Yeshiva, he said, his friends told him, he asked his friends, whatever, if they heard about his name, Samson, he said, don't waste your time. Don't even think about it. He's a Shaina. She's a beautiful girl, and she's not going to be interested in you. So she had the choices, and she didn't have to take the Bocher from the Mir, from Yeshivas. That's what she wanted. That was her shkafet, and that was her driving force. And then there's that little piece of memory that she wrote, that the first thing that she wanted in a husband was the Daf Kenan Asach Laman.
That's not what done.
What? That part I'm leaving out.
She didn't say modern.
No, she had modern ideas. Because she didn't want, okay, I won't discuss that.
And good looking.
I was once in Montreal, and the Shver was playing Bracha. I think he was in his 90s already then, and he was reviewing the proofs that came from the printer about the Tas Yehudis, the last sefer that he wrote. And we were looking it over, and he tells me like this. He says, I don't know when I made my start. He says, how did I do it? By day, I was busy in the yeshiva. He said, sure, yeah. At night, I had to run around and raise money for the yeshiva. And I don't know when I had the time to write my svarim. That's what he told me, those words. But I'm thinking that was only because the Rebbetzins of Chaim L'Ruach made sure to take care of everything else. And he had no other tirdis, and so the little time that he had, he was able to make svarim. And the Svarim, therefore, is a silent partner in all of them. And I think that just like a Mechaber of Svarim is considered whatever as a Marbitz Torah B'Rabbim, because even though he doesn't, the Shreya said shiurim for thousands of Talmidim over the years. But even though she didn't have the direct hands-on of that, but the Svarim are hers, and anybody that learns in the Svarim is indirectly a teacher of many, many people, multitudes. So she also has that same status as a Marbitz Torah B'Rabbim. So I wanted to express my hope and my tefillas, just like the many parts of the Siyam Mishnayos on the Starif, to become Shin Mashas, like all the people that are started together, everybody learned the Mishnayos, hopefully everybody completed it. So all the things that people already said and will say are going to Starif become, it should become Nispad Ka'alocha, Nispadas Ka'alocha. And it should be Bilam Mavas and Netzach.
Now Shoshana has written memories of her mother she'd like to share with you at Lakewood.
Just before, obviously I'm up here to, just channel my mother's memories and words. Just wanted to quickly say this, I didn't plan anything else to say anything, but after hearing what everyone's saying, I just couldn't help but think about something I said over by Eli and Sarah's Shar Brachos. The Gemara says that Rava, was Machshav's wife to like a different level. Rava, like 100%, like whatever she said, whatever you say, whatever it is, like really, really Machshav and show max respect. So Talmidim asked him, I don't understand. It's like, your wife drives you crazy. It seems like Rava had a very difficult life, the Gemara says. And she literally used to drive him up the what, everything, A to Z, whatever, like, that's what the Gemara says, that, it was a really rough situation. And so Rava said, listen, my wife is bringing up my kids. She's the one teaching them about B'tachon, about connection to Hashem, about Machshav Torah, Kavod Torah. That Dayenu, it's enough. Dayenu, it's enough. Everything else, that's secondary. And therefore I have to give her mass respect, be thankful to her. I was just thinking everything that we're talking, my father said about Machshav Torah and normalcy, that unique combination our whole family seems to have in spades, that it started with Bubby and Zayda. And obviously, the woman is the foundation of the house. Without the woman, the man can't do anything. He definitely can't reach the heights. It makes it much easier, obviously. The woman's whole goal is to help her husband get to the heights that Zayda got to. And, every decision Bubby made, everything that we're saying, for never getting angry, as far as, always having the wisdom to say the right thing in every situation, enjoying life, everything was, the goal was to, all those little decisions, tens of thousands of decisions are in every situation, led to all of us being here today and having these beautiful families. We should always be thankful to all those moments that Bubby had and everything she did over so many years. And Mr. Hashem, we should continue to, to channel all that in our own lives and keep on building out into the future, Mr. Hashem. Anyway, so whenever I say I, it's with my mother, and here we go. So when I was young, I didn't know who my mother was. It wasn't until I graduated into maturity and started to develop an adult relationship with her that I began to appreciate all aspects of her personality. Gone were the frustrations of youth, like when she wanted to know exactly where I was going. In parentheses, I was 20. Why I was going, who I was going with, followed by a very long debate as to why I needed to go. It was rough getting out of those years. When I was very young, I did not feel that my mother understood me or all my emotions, but when I grew up, I began to understand her. I began to see what an incredible person she was. As the years progressed, I was more and more in awe of her. I have the warmest memories of talking to her in Montreal for hours and laughing about the same things that made her laugh. She was very sharp and very funny. I remember my father coming into the dining room many times, smiling in a surprised way and saying, and we practice over Shabbos, "Favos lacht min azoi viel." Why are you laughing so much? Should Yaakov get the more down pat how to say that exactly? Next time. Exactly. You'll hide next time, yeah. I loved all the cartoons that she cut out and showed me on her visits and shared her appreciation for the smart humor in them. I love that she wrote down pages of every funny thing my father said in the last years of his life. It's incredible. I just found that out reading this. Who else would do that? She was such an intelligent woman. I loved talking to her about politics. I assumed that my own outrage over current events was inherited from her. Up until a year ago, I was still having hour-long conversations with her over the phone about different aspects of the American or world political situation. I so enjoyed her take on current events, always smart. Incidentally, she got a kick out of Trump. She found it amazing that a billionaire was so relatable to everyday American workers. And she found him funny. It was evident that she cared about everything. She always cared about what was right and what was wrong. She cared about principles right up until into her 90s. Everyone knows that the countless letters she took the time to write as a rough draft, then type it, then send to congressmen, White House justices, senators, and presidents, all while raising 6 children. I also began to notice how much care she put into things that were important to her, and a lot was important to her. When I went to Montreal to help her pack up the house, she had a house full of things that she had carefully collected over all the years. Some would argue that it was crazy to amass so many things, that it was too much for one person, and so it may be. But I would argue that it was amazing what she cared about, and how amazing were those storage rooms full of interesting treasures. I'm sure we all remember. She had an interest to collect all the little soaps from every hotel that she went to collect all the postcards she ever received and any other postcard that came her way, to collect every bencher from every simcha she went to, which also reminds me how she loved going to nice places and nice events and having new experiences. She would come back from a fancy wedding and describe every aspect to me in detail. That interest remained with her up until she was no longer able to do it anymore. This is remarkable and gives me a sense of how much there is to appreciate and enjoy in life. She wanted to share her collections with the children and grandchildren who would appreciate it as she did. And how much insight and joy did I receive, reading all the letters I had written over the years and birthday cards that I had received that she painstakingly collected and kept. Reading them over the last few weeks has been such a powerful reminder for me as to who I am and how many people cared about me. That is a gift my mother left me. Another thing we all know about her is how frugal she was. She was a child of the Depression and her father's daughter, and both factors very much shaped how she conducted her entire life. She fixed the sperm with the same expertise as her father had. Nothing I didn't know. A lot of things did. Always a perfect job. All the sperm, mother told all the sperm in the house were binding and everything. Bubby fixed everything perfectly. She did it herself. She was a terrorist. It's incredible. She didn't want to throw anything out and would look for any kind of use it could have. I, to her chagrin, never took after her in that regard and would playfully call to her, "Ma, I'm throwing things out." When she came to visit me in New York, although her saving may have seemed extreme, it did teach me to try and value and take care of things. It's a lost art. One of the greatest losses for me is never being able to talk to her again about anything going on in my life. She was always quietly but firmly supportive of me. She pushed her point of view, but it was always smart and gave me a good way to look at things. Although my mother was never demonstrative and never said "I love you," I felt her love and caring by the things she said and the things she did. She was my biggest cheerleader. She was always there to be proud of my accomplishments and always was upset if I sounded like I had a head cold, no matter how old I was. She was always interested in the plays I was doing or hearing about my experiences while teaching. She was always there to hear about any hardship I may have been going through in my life. She was a wonderful listener. Often, I would go on and on for several minutes describing something, and on many occasions I had to say, "Ma, are you still there?" She always was, and she listened patiently to everything I had to say, and she would interject very softly with advice on how to look at the situation in a positive light. Only a loving mother would save locks of your hair from when you were a baby. Only a loving mother would save all the letters and cards and first grade report card and the Shana Tova card you wrote when you were 6. Only a loving mother would save the outfits you wore as a toddler. Only a loving mother would give me a beautiful name, Shoshana, did I say that? Because she wanted me to know I was wanted, even though I was the 5th girl. Which is, it's unbelievable. Which is what she told me. It's unbelievable. My mother had an incredible sense of fun. So much so that she wanted to participate in every new experience. When she heard that my friend Aura and I were going to an alpine slide, she insisted on coming along. And yes, she sat in her car and flew down the hill right behind us. One summer, she and my father drove with me to Vermont to stay in my friend's trailer. They loved helping to build a bonfire and visiting the local cows. In parentheses, it says, for my father, it was reconnecting with his early years in Haradah. She just loved doing new things. Another summer, when I was single, I went to Europe with a friend of mine. My mother decided to join us for a few days as we visited France, Belgium, the Netherlands, and Germany. After all, it was she who told me to enjoy my single life as much as possible before marriage. And so I did. And she enjoyed it too. I am so impressed how she embraced a full social life upon coming to Israel at an advanced age. She told me many times, I don't believe in bored or tired. She certainly lived by that mantra. She also didn't believe in thinking about age. She had a passion for living and for learning. Even though we did not grow up in a house of money, remarkably, I learned the concept of class from my mother. The way she served her meals with so many courses, the way she put food out when guests came using her best crystal dishes, the way she arranged her clothes, her purses, her shoes, her jewelry. She had an incredibly elegant way about her, both in her conduct and her speech, and appreciated beauty. And my mother was very positive in her outlook. She never dwelled on worries and negativity. She had many disappointments and difficulties in her life. Yet, she always had an optimistic, forward-thinking, enthusiastic approach. What a thing to learn from. She had very deep emunah, but did not wear her fumkat on her sleeve. In that too, she was modest. She was always looking to read and learn, and I was privileged to watch her daven over many Yom Kippurs, where she stood for the entire davening. And she had a refinement of speech that you don't see today. I know she was proud of her children and grandchildren, evidenced by the pictures that filled every nook and cranny in her apartments, and I am sure that she will continue to look out for all of us. I am so proud to have had her as my mother, and I know that this is only a fraction of what could be said about her. I hope we can honor her memory by trying to internalize and emulate the beautiful and pure qualities of her character so she can look down and be proud.
Just as we had a surprise Messiah, we have a surprise speaker tonight who's going to say some spelling to us. Bobby, Uncle Barry.
My first encounter with Bobby Barrett was about 42 years ago. I arrived at JFK Airport. I was this greener Afrikaner coming to this crazy city of New York to meet my future in-laws. I see my future mother-in-law and I say, Shalom Aleichem Rebbetzin Baron. She says to me, Shalom Aleichem Baruch. I say Barry. Baruch. I say Barry. She said, Zayda Samson pipes in and says, Taka, sie ist gerecht. Gerecht, sorry, excuse my Yiddish. Sie ist gerecht. Darf sein a Yiddische Nummer. Baruch. I didn't correct him by saying Barry, because having been a military man back in South Africa, it was always, yes sir. I must acknowledge and I must admit something, that for many years it bothered me. My whole life I've been known as Barry. My parents, my family, my friends, my new collar at the time, Barry. All of a sudden, I'm now Baruch. What is this? You're changing my name? You're doing not what my father named me at my bris? And I could not come to terms with this. I was bothered by it for many years. And every time Bobby and Zayda Baron would say, Baruch, no. And it went dormant for many years until Zayda Baron passed away, and it kind of resurfaced again, and I'm trying to work out in my own mind, why did they change my name? And then when Bobby passed away, I got to come to terms with this. And I came to the realization, when Zayda said, Darf sein a Yiddische Nomen, to me, that to me was the crux of his life. The name Baruch versus Barry was a difference in approach to life. It was a difference in an understanding, a philosophy in life. His whole life, and as all the previous speakers have mentioned, his whole life was just living a true and emistika life of Torah. And Bobby, together with him, he would tell me, you gotta be a proud Jew. You gotta be a good Jew. And how important it is. I remember back in South Africa, as you know, we all had maids. And we were once sitting in our dining room, myself, my shver, and the maid. And we had a bottle of wine. We used to make our own wine, we couldn't get it kosher, we had made our own wine. And the maid touched the wine bottle. And there and then I asked Shver, explain to me, why is this wine now going to be osir? And he would say, and he answered me, is this: even a touch with a finger, you don't want to be influenced by a non-Jew. Even the touch can make a difference. And that's how I thought about this. You've got to be a proud Jew. Darf sein a Yiddische Nomen. That was the crux. You can only be great by living a Jewish life. Many previous speakers have mentioned beautiful things about Bobby and Zayda. And you mentioned about Zayda Samson. I was privileged to have been married by Zayda Samson to Esther. To me, he was the kindest man that I ever would know. He was the greatest, most wonderful person. Just a good, special person. And this is the home, like Rachmiel and others had mentioned, this is the home that Bobby Barron came from. The good and kind Zeta Sampson. And when she was able to get married, she took the Ben Torah, Rebbe Yitzchak mentioned, that Zeta Barron represented. And if you look at the character of Zeta Barron, he was a strong, determined, never give up kind of a guy, don't ever fall. That is what Zeta Barron represented. And with a little different kvetch to what all you guys were saying, if you think of Bobby Barron, she was an absolute genius in merging two contrasting characteristics, that of Zeta Sampson and that of Zeta Barron. The good with the strong, the kind with the determined, the special with never giving up. Those two contrasting characteristics could only be merged by somebody as smart and as unbelievable as Bobby Barron. She gave us that understanding that you can be good and strong and determined and kind all at the same time. And that is what I am taking back with me as my message that I have received from Bobby Barron. And may we all take that message too. Thank you.
So I guess Barat might need to ask Lechila from Uncle Baruch. As I called up Uncle Barry 2 minutes ago. So a lot has happened in the last few minutes.
That's it, that's it.
So Lechila.
No problem.
Very nice.
Eli? Mechubed Eli with some kind words.
Whoever put this fine document together, Lakewood, they wrote thoughts by my name. So they had the foresight to know that by this time nobody wants to hear anybody speak. So I'm just going to give some thoughts. And I wrote my thoughts down actually. Sometimes I lose myself in my own thoughts. So the truth is I'm probably one of the least qualified people in this room to say anything about Bobby. Yet here I am. And for those of you who know my mother-in-law, you know when she asks you to do something, well, you know the rest of it. So the truth is, I really didn't know Bobby on a personal level. I had the opportunity to meet her just a few times, and I got to see her in pictures and hear different things from the family, but I didn't know her personally. So I'm going to give you a little bit of my perspective, which is really the perspective of practically an outsider. And the thing that always struck me the most about Bobby was the way that she would carry herself. Bobby was an aristocrat. The way she would hold herself, the way she dressed, I think it was in Shoshana's letter, the way she would dress, the way that she carried herself, the way she had her sheitel in every single picture. It was a little outdated maybe, but always like placed perfectly on her head. Always wearing jewelry and makeup, and you could see that this is a person that had standards and was very clear about what her standards were, and wasn't shy about it, and was consistent with it, and consistent with her standards. The person that I would compare Bobby to that reminded